Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with my Frostbite Frostclaw build guide. This is most likely going to be the last in my series of Frostbite builds, and I certainly saved the most OP for last. This build pretty much outperforms both of the other builds, the Lightning Blast and the Glacier builds that I showcased previously. By far, the biggest highlight for this build is how tanky it is. In one of my other Jorah attempts, I got a little greedy and I accidentally did not dodge her big blast attack. And to my surprise, I actually survived it. It did like 8 or 9k ward damage, I don't remember exactly. But I totally tanked through it and killed Jorah off. There aren't too many builds in last Epoch that can tank through Jorah's wind-up attack. Anyway, it's pretty much guaranteed that this build is getting nerfed, but we can still enjoy it while it is still performing. So let me walk you through it. Irashaimase! Alright, let me show you my setup. I'll get started with the skills as usual, and just keep in mind that I won't be going into it in as much detail as the Lightning Blast build, for example. And so if you find yourself that I'm skipping some of the details, maybe review my Lightning Blast Frostbite build guide as well. I'll start with the Frostclaw setup because that's the main difference. Everything else is quite similar to the other two Frostbite builds that I shared. So Frostclaw. The main nodes that you want to go for are all the ones that reduce mana cost. So Frozen Rain as well as Gift of Winter. Max both of those out. You want as much mana reduction as possible. And then on top of that, make sure to get Volley of Glass. That is a must-have for reliable single target DPS. And I really like Colane Ballista as well. I'll show you the DPS increase on Ice Barrage thanks to this one in a second here. Other than that, Raywind's Veil is another node that you must hit. And Frost Beyond Time is also quite useful for the additional ailment duration. Cold and Calculating is okay. You already get a ton of ward from Frostclaw, so it's not a must-have. A little bit of extra crit chance from Rending Cascade is not bad either, because remember, we're running 68 int, so we're getting quite a bit of crit chance thanks to Calculated Destruction. So that translates to freeze rate multiplier, which translates to ward. It's quite nice to stack up all that freeze rate multi. This is how the build gets 16 to whatever k ward against Jorah. Anyway, so that's the big setup on Frostclaw. The main thing is this mana cost plus 90% on Volley of Glass is multiplicative with the mana cost that you end up having for Frostclaw after all the other mana cost reductions like this one, and your staff or wand or whatever you're wearing. And this is why we end up using a wand for this build rather than our usual two-hander, because without the wand with a two-hander, this ends up costing 10 mana. And that's a bit of a problem. It's a bit high. We can still make it work. I tested it, and against Jorah, we still got a very decent 30 to 35 second kill. However, in monos, the mana management is a little bit more problematic. With 4 mana Frostclaw, you can just run through just a little bit of mana regen and you're good to go. And that's the Frostclaw setup. The Ice Barrage setup is very similar. The only thing I would note is that we have 3 more points in it, and I would recommend putting them in Looming Frost and then 1 extra in Biting Cold. Don't put any in Sublimation. It doesn't actually increase your damage because of the negative fire rate drop. I do believe that fire rate drop is multiplicative, which is why as you go higher in points, it just penalizes you way too much. So avoid the 3rd point in Sublimation. Flame Ward is same as usual, getting the mana regen and maxing out damage reduction. Frost Wall, same as usual, nothing new here. Runic Invocation is same as before. Make sure to get your teleportation as well as Immutable Order, and to have Cold, Fire, Cold in your skill bar here to ensure that you get Frost Guard. Now let's go and test Colane Ballista just so I can show you how much extra damage it gives to Ice Barrage. So we're going to start by doing a simple Ice Barrage on a dummy without anything else. So we can see by the end of it, we get 290k ticks on this dummy. Next, we're going to do pretty much the same thing, clicking Ice Barrage on this dummy, but we're going to spam Frostclaw on the dummy on the opposite side, just to see how much our Ice Barrage DPS goes up towards the end on this one dummy right here. So let's check it out. So you saw it right there. We got like 490k ticks towards the end. So we went from 290 to 490 for our Ice Barrage. That is a 60%, let's say, increase in DPS towards the end of it. Not through the entirety of the Ice Barrage, but certainly towards the end of it. An Ice Barrage in itself also has a ramping effect thanks to Looming Frost. So there's a really good synergy between Ice Barrage and Frostclaw. I definitely recommend running Colane Ballista, especially for boss fights. This is how you can get your boss fight DPS through the roof and probably achieve 25-30 second Jorah kills with a really optimized setup, maybe even faster. And now in terms of items, you have the same core items here, the uniques, as previously. And the major difference here is that we're no longer running a two-handed weapon. We're running a wand and catalyst combination. And there are a few reasons for that. The primary one is mana management. With a two-hander, Frostclaw becomes 10 mana, and that's a little bit too high. Another benefit of Wand and Catalyst is that freeze rate multiplier now not only gives you damage because of the boots, and thanks to the cold penetration to Frostbites, it now also gives you ward because of this Aeowyn's Veil node right here. So anytime you can convert an affix to give you both damage and defenses, you want to do that, and then you want to spec into that affix as much as you can. And two-handed swords cannot have freeze rate multiplier, while wands and catalysts can. You want to make sure to have as much freeze rate multi in both of them. Unfortunately, I did not get super lucky with my focus, so that lightning res there ideally should be a freeze rate multi. Still, this is a great focus, and you do want cast speed, cold damage, and whatever other resistances you need to top up. With the wand, you also want cast speed, elemental dot, and freeze rate multi. Those are the three affixes that you must have on your wand. Amulet is same as before. Max out your armor shred, elemental dot, freeze rate multi, cold res. With helmet, similar as before, cold pen for frostbite, frostbite on cold skills, and then CDR implicits. For the chest piece, I did switch it a little bit. I opted for an Ice Barrage prefix, and the major reason here is not just because of the bonus to skill points, but also because it actually spawns with freeze rate multiplier. And as I already highlighted, freeze rate multi scales this build extremely well. Make sure to get as much as you can for it. And then the usual cold pen with frostbite sealed, and chance to apply frostbite with cold skills tier 5. So a really solid chest piece right here. The suffixes are a little bit weak, but that's okay. The prefixes and the sealed prefix are just supreme. Belt is the same as before. Elemental dot. I would ideally have freeze rate multi perhaps in the prefix. And then CDR, a hybrid armor, both solid. In terms of rings, I did opt for 2 opal rings for the CDR again. Just CDR makes Runic Invocation have a reasonable cooldown. If you can bring it down to 5-6 seconds, somewhere in that area, your gameplay will be much smoother. And you can do that with a lot of int, as well as various CDR items. So you can see this opal ring, it gives you 10% max CDR by default, a little bit of attributes, so it's a really good choice. And now let's talk about idols. The main benefit of running a two-handed sword is that it can spawn with armor shred more so than anything else in the game, raising your chance to proc frostbite. And so if we're not running the two-hander, we want to get as many sources of frostbite as possible, and we supplement that with these arcane idols. Frostbite with cold skills, so 55 here and another 56, 111% chance. So it makes dropping this two-hander not as painful. And we also run the usual frostbite duration idols, and of course Throne of Ambition. And so I think this is the optimal idol setup. In terms of blessings, we do have the exact same setup as the Glacier build. Increased leech rate, freeze rate multi in the second one, all res in Reign of Dragons, and then double armor in these two blessing nodes. In terms of passives, there aren't too many differences. I think the mage tree is pretty much the same. Spellblade is the same. The Sork passive tree, I do believe we took out points out of wisdom because we don't need nearly as much mana regen or as much mana. And we did max out calculated destruction and the armor here. On the Runemaster passive tree, the main difference here is maxing out Mantle Catalyst. And that's because we're now running a Catalyst, so we can take advantage of this. It's a really strong node. Plus 6 int, as well as bonus damage mitigation for crits. Notice that we have 48 here and another 27 here, so we don't actually fully mitigate crits. We only mitigate 75% of the crit damage. But who knew when you're running 15k ward, crits don't matter all that much. In an ideal case scenario, you would be mitigating those crits completely, but it is what it is. I also still run the Runework Cataclysm because of the extra damage to low health enemies. And honestly, this is pretty much about it when it comes to the setup. There isn't much room to get this build wrong, honestly. It just plays itself. There are too many nodes that are must-have. The itemization is pretty straightforward. You can obviously run Mad Alchemist later if you happen to have a 2 or 3 LP Mad Alchemist. And you can get that cast speed, the Eladot, freeze rate multi into it. You're not going to be taking advantage of the increased spell damage that it has. However, you're going to be taking advantage of the increased cast speed. And that's crazy powerful. So it's definitely something to consider if you happen to have a bunch of Mad Alchemist Lados lying around. In terms of the skill rotation, it's again fairly simple. You get your runes up and then Frost Wall, teleport on top of it, cast Ice Barrage, run, and then Frostclaw as necessary. When you have a strong single target enemy or a clump of enemies that you want to get rid of quickly, that's when you Frostclaw. And let's give this build the final verdict. Here we have it, Frostbite, Frostclaw, tier 4 Jorah. You saw we had a solid 34 second or so kill. So 30 to 40 seconds is what I estimated at. But honestly, if you can get a tier 7 armor shred in your gloves, you can bring that down to 25 seconds, very likely, with some better optimization, better itemization. So altogether, I put it at S tier. That is mainly because the survivability of this build is absolutely ridiculous. You can tank the big wind-up attack of Jorah. So you can just even close your eyes and do whatever you want, and you're still going to complete the fight, which is why you get S tier here. And single target is the weakest point for the build, because as we go to monoliths, I put it at corruption 600 plus. I'm sure you can go way higher than 600 once you optimize, once you learn the correct play style, just because of that super high survivability, which is easily S plus. Mobility, I put it at B plus. If you can get tier 7 move speed into your boots, I would definitely upgrade this to something like A or so. But that's the main drawback here, is the boots are just way too slow. So overall, monoliths, I got it at S plus tier, easily. Multiplayer utility, I put it at B. Cost to itemize, same as the other Frostbite builds that we have. They pretty much all three have the exact same 3 requirements in the glove, boots, and relic. So final tier, I have it at S plus. This is certainly the best Frostbite build that we have available to us right now, because Frostclaw is overtuned, and I guarantee you it will see some nerfs. So enjoy it while we can, and it's a pretty straightforward verdict for us here, S plus. That's the end of the build guide. I'll leave you with a corruption 528 monolith clear. It's as far as I've gotten so far, but trust me, I'll keep pushing with this build a little bit more. And then for my next build guide, I'm not sure exactly where I'll head. I have a bunch of different ideas I want to try out. I'll have to also see what kind of items I have available. It's probably going to be another Runemaster build. I might do 1 or 2 more before switching to another class. Runemaster just has so much versatility. It's quite a fun class to play. I haven't done anything with fundamental criterion yet, so I feel like I should try at least one build with fundamental criterion. Either way, If you have enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe. It does help the channel quite a bit, and it does help guide me towards videos that people enjoy more. You can also check me out on Twitch and see me progress through different builds or just farm a bunch of items. And this week, I'm very excited to be trying out Endless Dungeon. That game comes out on Thursday, so if you want to check that out on Twitch, join in and see if you like it. Anyways, thank you all for the support. I really appreciate it. Take it easy and gochiso sama deshita.